Danielle, during an emergency briefing this morning, the La Crosse County Health Department said it's too soon to reopen the community. The department does not believe the pandemic has reached its peak and says going back to normal life now could be dangerous. Kudo says she has heard from members of the deaf community that say having her there to interpret have helped them understand the local impacts of COVID-19. Bob, 52-year-old Kevin Loftus didn't make it hard for the FBI to find him. Carla, I had the chance to speak one-on-one with Vice President Pence this morning at Dairyland Power Cooperative in La Crosse. While he touched on topics like COVID testing and Kenosha protests, his main message this Labor Day was about a job market that continues to try and bounce back. Thanks, Bob. I'm still outside City Hall where ballots have continued to get dropped off to be counted in the city clerk's office. Now, we do have an update on the election. We have 25 of 35 precincts with their votes in, and it's a 50-vote race right now. Vicki Markison has 51% with 2,516 votes, and Mitch Reynolds at 49% at 2,466. So it's still up in the air who's going to be the 43rd mayor for the city of La Crosse. 25 years later, the Rotary lights are bigger than ever, and every night at 5 p.m. they go from this to this, and this year organizers say there's even more to experience. Vice President Pence says there is no question that when Wisconsinites do compare President Trump's campaign to Biden's, that just like in 2016, the Badger State will again vote for 4 more years of President Trump in the White House.
A monster did something horrible to him, but he's not the one they're going to remember. It's going to be Anthony they remember.
In the early hours of June 27th, 19-year-old Anthony Fimple was shot and killed while serving as a door host in a downtown La Crosse bar. Now, as Christmas nears, the La Crosse community is remembering him by doing something he did regularly, donating blood.
There was a little app that would alert him whenever his blood was being used. Not only to get a kick out of it, but he really saw the results of how his donation was helping other people.
Anthony's father, Gus Fimple, says while every parent sees their child through rose-colored glasses, the outpouring of love and memory shared since his son's passing prove he was one of the best. Anthony received Versity blood to keep his organs viable while awaiting transplant surgery following the shooting.
Kind of came full circle in kind of a poetic and kind of a sad way, but I'm glad it did work out.
Donating up until the end, Anthony's organs went on to save 6 people.
His lungs are here in Wisconsin, and I have been in contact with that person. The rest of them are throughout the Midwest and the East.
The Fimples have been told that all the transplant surgeries were successful, including his heart, which is now in Illinois.
You know, somebody's family out there is having a Christmas right now with their loved ones because of this tragedy and Anthony's gift.
Gus admits that he would much rather have his son here today, but events like the blood drive and knowing his son helped others provides a glimmer of hope.
With the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, and then we have this huge hole, it's really hard to put a smiling face on and go out every day. 6 months since his passing, Anthony's remembered every day by the community, not just in Tuesday's blood drive, but also by this tree planted in his honor inside Myrick Park. He was big into conservation, and he worked with WEAU, so the fact that they planted a tree in his honor, it's going to be there for years and years and years. The tree, a weeping willow, chosen by the WEAU, who remember Fimple as a role model.
That the second summer he came back as an assistant crew leader, and which was more of a leadership role, but also like setting the example for the new crew members.
WEAU operations manager Chad Duchateau says he thinks of Anthony every day when he walks by the tree and is told the Fimple family visits weekly.
If you turn around and kind of face the marsh, and it's quite a neat spot to remember him by, seeing the bluffs and the marsh.
And more than 108 donors remembered Anthony at the blood drive, including his parents, Gus and Kristen, who say Anthony would have been thrilled to help out, but more bashful about it being in his honor.
If he were here, and I'm sure he's watching somewhere, he probably thinks this is way too much. He was a very humble kid.
Finding a little light in the darkness. While no longer here, Anthony Fimple's legacy lives on. In La Crosse, Hayley Spitler, WEAU 13 News.
Well, it was a banner day, no doubt, and it was the beginning of a pretty interesting year.
March 18th, 2020. the first case of COVID-19 was found in La Crosse County.
A year ago, I think, would mark a very emotional time. I'll probably get emotional. I was called by my leader to assist in testing. And I think as nurses, we always are there. We're ready to respond to duty. That's our calling.
Ready to respond to a world of unknowns, stricken by fear of what the virus had already done in other communities. Health systems and health departments, typically in the background, were now in the spotlight.
My leader and I and one of our quality nurses and one of my educators were sitting there and we cried because we knew that was our moment to prepare for what was to come so we could be strong for our team the next day.
Strong despite the worry and concerns, prepared to support people thinking they may have COVID-19.
You went to school and you knew that you were going to encounter illnesses, diseases, all this type of stuff, but you're there as a nurse to try to comfort the patient.
A year later, that first case has morphed into more than 12,000. When RN Shelley Needfeld reflects back on those first few affected, she says a COVID diagnosis was almost like having a scarlet letter.
When we would call patients when they're positive, you would hear them in shock. You would hear them crying, saying, "Oh my gosh, what did I do?" And they almost felt awful that it occurred. And how did this happen? I was so careful, and you could feel the pain in their voice.
As testing began, Gunderson CEO Scott Rathberger thought it would be temporary.
I really think we were talking a matter of months. Whether it was 3 months, 6 months, maybe on the outset is kind of what I was thinking.
Public health educator Rachel King says the health department tries to stay positive, but last fall, it was hard. As college students returned in the city, outbreaks started in nursing homes.
I would say that journey was one of the hardest for us as a team because we knew there wasn't a whole lot we could do at that point. When there is an outbreak in a long-term care facility, it's hard to contain.
Only one death had been attributed to COVID by then. That quickly changed.
You know, we have 80 deaths total in La Crosse County. It's hit our community hard.
Additional contact tracers were brought on board. It was too late. The demand created by the surge was too high.
In December, we saw some cases that were almost 300 cases a day. And that was really hard for our team to know that we were never going to be able to reach everybody in a really quick amount of time.
1 year and 65,000 tests later, there's hope in the form of COVID-19 vaccines.
There was almost no way to predict that we would have a vaccine this quickly. It had never happened in the history of human medicine.
From swabbing patients filled with fear to vaccinating eager Wisconsinites feeling a sense of relief.
It was probably one of the most amazing experiences that I've had in my healthcare career.
365 days later, vaccine administration is on the rise while cases, hospitalizations, and COVID-related deaths are on the decline.
In the worst of times, you do find the best in people.
I will have great memories about this time on how the community responded to our pleas and the pleas across the state.
Doctors remind the community to stick with precautions so the pandemic can be a thing of the past.
Are you saying yes to the dress? I'm saying yes to this dress.
When it comes to picking out a wedding dress, a bride has lots of choices to make. Cost, style, color, but one decision they shouldn't have to make is how many people they can bring to the appointment. Faced with new COVID protocols, one salon has turned to some virtual options to make sure everyone is included.
We've got these fun stands that we can put either FaceTime or we zoom in your loved one or whoever you wanted to come in to view your appointment.
Charlotte's Bridal in La Crosse is adapting to COVID-19 with new policies. Masks are required to be worn indoors, only stylists are going through the racks of dresses, and brides are limited to 3 or 4 guests in the store. However, better Wi-Fi, a Zoom account, and stands for phones were all purchased to make sure a bride can include more friends and family virtually.
I zoomed in my grandma, Vanderpool from Ohio, and my cousin Courtney, who is so close growing up, and then I zoomed in a coworker as well.
Bride Caitlin Douglas got engaged August 19th and is getting married in May. She says finding her dress takes one stress off of planning, something that's filled with a lot of what ifs due to COVID-19. One thing that made her day even better, getting to show her grandma the dress she will walk down the aisle in.
She was bawling. It was so great. I loved it. I love I loved her reaction just to be here, and even today putting on the dress that was my dress, and she had to see her reaction was amazing.
Charlotte's bridal owner Jen Walker says brides are using the new feature often.
We kind of put the person with the rest of your group at that same level, so it's almost like they're here, even though it's through the camera.
Based on the first one.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Good job.
While the virtual options come with additional cost for the store, Walker says it's well worth it to help out brides, and it will continue even after the pandemic ends.
Sometimes it's not feasible for somebody to come for an appointment either, like they live in Texas or California, and that's a really long trip to make for a bridal appointment.
Charlotte says the number of guests allowed in person can change based on the local COVID-19 risk. One back-to-school issue that's not new to districts but amplified due to the pandemic is the shortage in substitute teachers.
I would say the sub shortage has been talked about in every region that I've been, every conversation that we're a part of. Nobody has fixed that.
Black River Falls School District Superintendent Dr. Shelley Severson says the district has 175 full-time teachers and only 27 substitutes with varying availability currently signed up. Whether a radio spot, newsletter ad, or parent meetings, the schools are always trying to recruit. The school district says that in a normal year, if a substitute teacher is unable to be found for a class, that the students are split up into the other classes of the same grade level. However, this year with COVID-19, that's not an option.
If we can't find a substitute, we're going to have to pull somebody else from within the building, which means there might not be music that day because that teacher is subbing. There might not be Phy-Ed one day, or our school counselor might be subbing that day.
With the mask mandate in effect, Black River Falls no longer needs to limit subs to one building. The district also has 2 full-time floating subs who were used every school day last year. The shortages don't stop with teachers.
Transportation has been a real challenge, and as I talk to colleagues across the whole state, nobody has figured out how to be able to socially distance on the bus.
This year, Black River Falls is having early release, so aides can assist bus drivers with assigned seats and mask requirements. The district has 18 bus routes and just 4 sub bus drivers. Finding it difficult to fill the position, some districts turn to bus companies like Southwest for contracts. Southwest covers busing in Sparta, Prairie du Chien, and DeSoto. Those 3 cities require around 60 drivers, and in mid-August, positions still need to be filled.
It's getting to be crunch time. Luckily, we do have a few shop staff, myself, our router, and a few mechanics that are able to drive bus. They do have their licenses.
Jason Schwartz with Southwest Bus Company says around 60% of the company's employees are retired. For Black River Falls, a significant amount of subs and bus drivers are also retired, an age group at a higher risk for coronavirus.
The COVID factor of it played in a little bit. We did lose a few drivers at the end of last year when the schools closed.
Bus driver roles can be harder to fill because of the long process required for training and certification. Southwest is working with school districts weekly to adhere to COVID plans and stocking up on PPE. The man accused of fatally shooting a bar employee in downtown La Crosse on June 27th appeared in intake court Monday afternoon. Timothy Young of Spring Grove, Minnesota is charged with first-degree intentional homicide in the death of Anthony Fimple. If convicted, he faces life in prison.
The strength of the state's case is strong. There are several eyewitnesses that identify Mr. Young as the shooter in this case, as well as surveillance video of the crime in which the defendant can clearly be identified.
Bond was set during Young's court appearance.
I am satisfied that a significant cash bond is appropriate to protect the public. The court will set cash at the amount of $1 million as requested.
If bond is posted, Young will be on house arrest with GPS monitoring and is to have no contact with the victim's family. The La Crosse Police Department says the incident unfolded early Saturday morning around 12:47 a.m.
Officers responded down to the Twisted Moose for possible shots fired call, and when they arrived on scene, discovered that one male party had been shot.
According to police officers, it's at this entryway of the Twisted Moose, also known as the La Crosse Beer House, where witnesses saw Timothy Young shoot 19-year-old bouncer Anthony Fimple.
Mr. Young had been in the Twisted Moose earlier in the evening, had left, and then returned to the Twisted Moose and was denied entry into the Twisted Moose, at which time he left and came back and the incident took place where he shot Mr. Fimple.
According to the criminal complaint, officers found Fimple bleeding from his head at the scene. He died at the hospital Saturday. The complaint also notes this is not the first time the bar has had issues with Young.
Mr. Young has had some incidents in the downtown area, and we are looking into those incidents.
The La Crosse Police Department says it has seen an uptick in gun-related calls this year.
Remain vigilant of your surroundings. If you see something, say something, call us. We'll take a look at whatever it might be and we'll work with you.
Young is scheduled to make his initial court appearance on July 14th at 11 a.m. Anyone with information related to the incident is asked to reach out to the police department as the investigation is ongoing.